Thank you for joining us in tonight's webinar event, RIOTS, A Proactive Approach with Scott Kirshner. To the many who are joining us again and those who are joining us for the first time, we welcome you. I congratulate you in recognizing and acknowledging that bad things happen and that those bad things can happen to each of us. Participating tonight is a giant step in the direction of taking responsibility and acknowledging that we are each our first line of defense. I am Doris Wise, and I'm president and founder of Children of Jewish Holocaust Survivors and Jews Can Shoot. I am deeply grateful to the awesome Scott Kirshner, who has been and continues to be so generous with his time and his knowledge and his willingness to share with us the skills to survive in situations we hope never to find ourselves in, but that history has taught us is not without possibility. Please read Scott's bio, extensive bio, and do yourself a favor and buy his book, Surviving Violent Encounters, available on Amazon. Buy one for yourself and for anyone you care about. And now, without further ado, I am proud to turn the mic over to Scott Kirshner. Thank you.
Hello everybody, welcome to RIOTS, a proactive survival approach. Tonight we have a lot of good information to go over, so let's start off right at the beginning here.
It was the beating that symbolized the lawlessness and brutality of the Los Angeles riot. Truck driver Reginald Denny dragged from his rig and nearly killed.
Yeah, I think we can all think back to that 1992 riot and see the outcome of violence due to rioting. It's something that I think for many Americans especially is really stuck in our mind. So that's kind of the prelude to what we're doing today. In my years of studying violence, I have a quote that I've been using, and it's, "The veil of society is thin. Once pierced, chaos quickly ensues." And I find that to just be a very true statement that's been proven in history time and time again. So as we get into this, I just want to put up a quick disclaimer that nothing we talk about tonight is legal advice. Unfortunately, when you're dealing with violence and riot situations, it's not a mathematical formula where you can plug in some numbers and have an outcome that's to be expected. Violence don't work that way, so if need to, contact an attorney for any legal questions that you might have. So first, we're going to define what a riot is. We're going to discuss mob mentality and how that plays a huge factor in the outcomes of riots. We're going to review sources of information, and probably the most important thing we're going to discuss tonight are riot survival tactics. So regardless of how you define a riot, the one component that is in all definitions is violence. So riots contain violence, whereas if you look at a protest, that could be an action expressing disapproval or objecting to something. A riot will involve some form of actual violence. Machiavelli has a quote that I really like. It's, "The temper of the multitude is fickle." And it really says a lot. You know, when you get a lot of people in an area and they're angry about an issue, the outcome can be, he terms it fickle, but it can be very bad, it can be violent, it can be chaotic, and it can cause a lot of problems for anybody that's involved in that situation. In Dr. Isolde's short article, Understanding Why People Riot, I think he really succinctly puts into perspective mob mentality. So let me read this to you. "But once it has begun, the raging mob has a life of its own. Deep-seated resentments, repetitive frustrations, and long-standing disappointments galvanize people into action. And the mob provides cover and anonymity that makes it easier to overcome one's usual reticence or moral scruples. One is immersed, engulfed, and it can become an exuberant experience, a joyful release for long suppressed emotions." Such a powerful paragraph right there, and let's really dig deeper into that. So a mob mentality allows for one's loss of individuality. When they become part of the group, they really get lost in themselves, and part of the problem is that leads to loss of or reduced inhibitions. You then start to engage in behaviors that you might not normally engage in, which can be problematic and clearly unlawful. A sense of detachment. think about many people who use or abuse drugs and alcohol use that to get a sense of detachment, a break from reality, a break from the day-to-day problems that we might face in our lives. And a mob can substitute for that as well. And then that feeling of anonymity. And it's important to say is while there might be a feeling of anonymity, that doesn't mean that there's going to be true anonymity, as we're going to point out a little bit later. So when I ask people, if you were to find yourself in a riot situation, what would you do? 99.9% of the people say, I would just avoid it. And that is a great concept. Avoidance would be great, but you don't always get to make that decision. That option will not always be available for you. So while obviously avoidance of a mob or a riot is the best option, one of the things that you can do in an area that you do have control over is you have the ability to gather information and intelligence from publicly available sources. You'll find that information is one of your most important assets. And you can gather information that is local, regional, and international, and all of those can tie into the location where you potentially are traveling to or you live. Keep in mind, riots and mob activity can be spontaneous and might just begin as that peaceful protest. So remember, a peaceful protest can be set off into a riot with one person acting out in a violent manner, and then that mob mentality takes over, and then you have a chaotic situation that you find yourself in. That's a very dangerous place to be. So some of the incidents that you want to pay attention to are law enforcement shootings and use of force. Think back to Ferguson, Missouri, when Officer Darren Wilson shot and killed Michael Brown. You know, the whole riot started and everybody was saying, hands up, don't shoot. Well, if you read the Department of Justice report on that, you'd find that the whole hands up, don't shoot never happened. It was an absolute complete lie. It was a fabrication, and the person who came up with that fabrication repeatedly admitted to it, saying that Michael Brown didn't have his hands up, and at no point did he ever say, don't shoot. But that didn't stop the ladies on The View from constantly bringing up this issue. It didn't stop TV shows from bringing up the issues of hands up, don't shoot. It didn't stop your athletes from walking on the playing field doing the hands up, don't shoot. So this is an incident that was based on a false narrative that never happened, that got spread throughout the world of hands up, don't shoot, when it was a complete lie. Then you have anti-government rallies, and that can be no matter where you live, what country you live in, because I know tonight we have people from Canada, Europe, and all over the world. Political issues and racial tensions are also very popular reasons why people will riot. So you can get your information from numerous sources. Obviously, television is a viable option. Local and cable news will tell you. On your radio, especially when you're in your vehicle, every now and then turn off the radio and put on talk radio. Switch your station from music to talk radio. And generally, every half hour and on top of the hour, they go over news that might be important to your local region. You can also go online to get news from Google News, or you can do an internet search for whatever news source that you like to use. Another big one is news apps from your smartphone. You can download an app and they will do push notifications to let you know if something is happening in the area that you reside. So that's a really good way. There are public safety related apps. One of them is Nixle, and I'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. And then there's social media. Now, unfortunately, there are many people that get their news from Facebook and Twitter and some form of social media, which can be fast, but it might not always be accurate. So it can actually cause more problems by providing bad information or incorrect information. And then the last two is ham radio and shortwave radio. Now, ham radio can be just a little radio that you use. There are many ham radio operators that participate in something called nets, N-E-T-S. And what these nets are is they're sources of information that are relayed to people who have ham radios and listen. So if in that local region there's any kind of big crisis going on, the operators will automatically form a net. People will know to go to a certain frequency, and they will start relaying information. So if you're across town and you have valuable information to relay to that net, you'll get on your ham radio, you'll transmit that information, and then you're part of that up-to-date two-way communication of valuable information. Now, the good thing with a ham radio is you do not need a license to listen to any transmission, but you do need a license to transmit. And the Federal Communication Commission, the FCC, says that in an actual true emergency, you don't even need a license to communicate on that. So if it is a true emergency, you can legally transmit information. And then people use shortwave radios as well as another source of obtaining and receiving valuable information that can be relevant to avoid protests and riots. Now, one app that I use is called Nixle, N-I-X-L-E, and according to their website, they're an open communication forum that connects public safety, municipalities, schools, businesses, and the communities that they serve. And what I like about Nixle is you can get information from them that's real-time in a lot of different formats. So the way that I have it set up is they will send me an email, they will send a push notification to my phone through their app, they will send a text message right away. So there's a lot of different ways that you can get. And the particular area where I live, the police department is linked up with Nixle, so I get a lot of relevant information. Now, fortunately, I live in an area where there's not a lot of riots, but, you know, there could be a crime in progress, an active shooter. It could even be a major accident, a major medical issue that's rerouting traffic. It could be a whole lot of things that provides me real-time information that I find very valuable. Now, you would want to look up and see if Nixle is in the area that you live. It may not be. If not, you would want to look up some other public safety apps that might be relevant for your area. So while avoidance is the best option, in reality, you can do everything correct and still end up at the wrong place at the wrong time. And one of the things that I like to say is because hope is not a survival strategy, you're going to need specific skills on how to deal with a riot. So let's turn our focus to those hard skills that we can use that will hopefully make us all a little bit safer in the real world environment. So we're going to talk about riot survival tactics. And the first thing I will say is, remember, there are no guarantees. And if you listen to the previous webinar we did, it was called Surviving Violent Counters, Win, Survive, Prevail. And that was based off of a book that I wrote. And if you want to read the book, you can get it from Amazon.com. In that, I say that if you find yourself in a violent encounter and you do nothing, chances are you're going to be victimized. But even if you fight back, which, you know, many times I want you to fight back, I want you to be proactive in your safety and security, there are still no guarantees. It's the same thing with the riot situation. There's no guarantee that no matter what you do, that you're going to have a positive outcome. But like with dealing with any kind of violent situation, we can almost always say if you do nothing, chances are you will be victimized. And that's why we're here tonight, to reduce our chances of being victims. So let's talk about some realities of a riot. Number one, riots can occur anywhere at any time. So I don't care if you live in a well-to-do neighborhood that's wealthy. I don't care if you live in the poorest part of town that has a high crime rate. A riot can occur anywhere. So don't feel that just because you live in what is a nice area that you're insulated or isolated from the potential riots, because that's not the case. Violence can escalate extremely quickly. Remember, you might have one person in a protest, in a peaceful protest, that does something violent, and now that mob mentality kicks in, and now all of a sudden you went from a peaceful protest to a riot that's extremely dangerous. Not a good place to be. Situational awareness is a critical skill that you must have. And I'm going to say right now, if you are an individual that does not focus on your situational awareness, I want you to make that commitment to yourself and to your family right now, that that's a skill that you're going to improve, because it is one of the most incredibly important skills that you will have. You cannot respond to a potential act of violence if you are unaware that there's even a problem in your area. So situational awareness is a skill, and like any other skill, you do have to practice it. It's not difficult per se, but it does need practice. The other thing is, in a riot, remember, it's a chaotic situation, so you need to continually assess your environment and what's going on. And you need to avoid tunnel vision. Now, by definition, tunnel vision is the loss of peripheral vision. So you don't see what's out to your right, you don't see what's out to your left. You're focused mainly on what's in front of you. And some people kind of say it's like looking through toilet paper tubes. You know, you have that tunnel vision right in front of you. The problem with tunnel vision is you're excluding a major part of your environment that's going to provide you information. That information could be relevant to help you make decisions on your safety. So it's important to have situational awareness and assess the situation and avoid that tunnel vision. In a riot, the 911 emergency telephone system is going to be overwhelmed. Now, if you live in a different country, you might not have 911, you might have another system. So whatever system is in your locale is what you want to be focused on. Police departments, fire departments, ambulances, paramedics, you're not going to be able to get through to them. So what this means to you is you're going to be on your own. That's an important concept to kind of grasp right now, because that's telling you is that your safety and security is going to be your responsibility. You either have the skill sets to deal with that or you don't. You can't rely on somebody else in those situations. In a riot, you will be videotaped. You're going to be videotaped by police. Those police officers might be undercover. They might be videotaping you surreptitiously without your knowledge. You will be taped by news organizations, riot participants, and citizen observers. So when we look back at the mob mentality, you have that sense of isolation and detachment. At the end of the day, you're going to be on somebody's video, and you need to be accountable and responsible for your actions. Because if you do something that is against the law and you hurt another individual, at some point in time, you may be held accountable in a court of law. And, you know, at the end of the day, you don't want to break away from your values, morals, and ethics. So be strong in your belief system and who you are, and don't fall into that mob mentality. And while people think in the calmness of where you're at right now that would never happen to me, remember how powerful that mob mentality is, and it can happen to you, believe me. So there are 3 areas of concern we want to talk about: on foot, in your vehicle, and in your home. So on foot, you can inadvertently walk to the riot, or the riot can walk to where you're at. In a vehicle, you can inadvertently drive up to a riot, or you can end up in the middle of a chaotic situation. And in your home, the riot comes to you. So on foot, what you want to do is use your senses. This is where we come back to situational awareness, being aware of your environment. What are your eyes telling you? What are you seeing? What are you hearing from the crowd? What's going on that you can hear? And noise. What are you smelling? Are you smelling OC pepper spray maybe? Are you smelling some form of chemical agent? Gasoline? Maybe somebody's planning on using a Molotov cocktail bomb. All of these things on your senses, you want to be able to be aware of your environment and know exactly what's going on. So here's a picture, and obviously there's a police officer down. If you look just above the police officer, it looks like there's a petite female who's also knocked to the ground. In this picture, can you tell who the good person is and who the bad person is? Now look, how many cameras do you see in this photo? Take a second and just kind of look at that. And these are all the cameras that I was able to see, and you know, there might even be more, but this is what I found. What this is telling you is you can't count on anybody for your safety. All those people with a camera are more interested in getting a photo or a video of the incident rather than helping 2 human beings that are on the ground, one of them who's a police officer. And I think that says a lot about society, and not in a good way. That's appalling. And to me, that's totally unacceptable, especially as a prior law enforcement officer. So if you're on foot and you're in immediate danger, you're going to need to conduct a rapid assessment of the situation and take appropriate course of action. One of the questions you need to ask yourself is, do you need to fight? Now, this might be counterintuitive, but you don't want to get into a fight in a riot situation, because chances are you're going to be way outnumbered. Okay, so you kind of want to blend in. You want to look for, is there an escape route? Okay, if there's an escape route that you can take, by all means, that's your goal. Can you find a safe place to shelter from the mob? And again, with your situational awareness, you want to look for weapons of opportunity that are in your environment. And every environment has a weapon of opportunity. It might not be a conventional weapon, but it could be something that you can use that will keep you and your family safer. Again, you have to be proactive in your safety and security. That's a huge responsibility for all of us as individuals that we need to grasp and just take that. We need to have that ability. Now, if you are not in immediate danger, you want to constantly scan for an escape route. If there is no escape, if that's not a viable option, blend into your environment. And I love this photo. You have a bunch of dogs here, and in that photo is what? A little fox. And what is that fox doing? It's just looking straight ahead like everybody else. In a riot situation, that's what you want to do. You don't want to draw attention to yourself. You want to be the gray person. And the gray person concept just says that you don't stand out. You fit in. You look like you belong there. Even though you might not want to be in the middle of a riot, you look like you belong there. And constantly scan for an escape route. If you're not in immediate danger, go with the flow. Always look for those escape options. And again, I'm going to reiterate, don't get sucked into mob mentality. And again, it's easy to do. It happens to a lot of good people. You don't want to get involved with that, because you will be held accountable for your actions. Now, this is another area where people have a hard time with. So if you're not in immediate danger and you don't want to be in a riot situation, just keep in mind, the police are going to view everybody as a potential threat. You have to remember, officers that are responding to riots, they're nervous, they're human beings. They have the same emotions as you. The one thing that separates them is they should be a whole lot more highly trained than you are. But you're going to want to avoid them because they're going to view you as a potential threat. So your goal in a riot, avoid the rioters who are causing problems and avoid the police until you can find an escape route. So this goes back to the concept that you're going to be on your own and that you're going to be responsible for your own safety and security during that period of time. Now, we talked about this in the previous webcast, Surviving Violent Encounters. If you get knocked down to the ground, your number one priority is to get back on your feet as soon as possible. The longer you are on the ground, the higher your chance that you're going to be trampled by other rioters or you're going to be assaulted by rioters. The ground is not a good place to be, and I don't care if you're a world expert on Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you have 10 or 15 people kicking you, throwing rocks at you, taking sticks and beating you, you're going to lose that encounter. Okay? Now, if you are armed with a firearm, keep it concealed. Again, this is going to be counterintuitive for a lot of people. The reality is, you want to blend in. Keep your firearm concealed, because if you pull it out when you're not in immediate danger, you're going to draw unwanted attention to yourself. Okay? So no matter how many bullets you have, no matter how many magazines you have, you're probably not going to have enough to take out everybody who's a potential threat to you. So only draw your weapon when you need to defend yourself or a loved one from an imminent threat. An imminent threat is right here, right now. You are in danger of death or serious bodily injury. Again, blend in, avoid attention from both the police and the rioters. If you're with family members, it's a very difficult situation. Okay, your number one priority is going to be to protect your family members. Okay, so whether it's your spouse, whether you have children, if you are in the middle of a riot and it's turning violent, you want to protect the head and the face. So try to cover your children with even a simple hat, clothes, newspapers, anything that you can, and you want to try to cover their face. Number one, when you cover their face, you're taking away their vision. Okay? If children who cannot see a potential problem, worry less about it. So it's a method to keep them a little bit more calm, but remember, they're still going to be hearing what's going on. And the other thing is, if there are chemical agents being sprayed in the area, it will hopefully provide at least some form of protection for your children. Now let's move on to vehicle tactics. Now, we all would probably like to have a vehicle like this if we find ourselves in a riot situation, but that's not reality. So let's go back to reality. So, situational awareness again. If you're driving and you see protesters ahead of you blocking the road, your first priority should be stop and turn around. You don't slow down and slowly drive up to it. Because what you'll eventually do is find yourself in gridlock where now you can't move. You can't move forward, you can't move back, you can't change lanes left or right. That's not where you want to be. So do not willingly drive yourself into a dangerous situation. Make sure that your doors are locked and that your windows are rolled up. The only caveat I have to the windows rolled up, the driver's side, you might want to have the window down just a little bit for two reasons. It's more difficult to break the window when it's not completely rolled up because it doesn't have as much tension, okay? Another thing is it does provide you the ability to hear more of what's going on in your environment. Now, we saw the video earlier on Reginald Denny. He suffered 91 fractures to his skull. To this day, he still has medical issues because of that incident. So, I'm not going to Monday night quarterback that situation because, you know, I'm not Reginald Denny and I wasn't in his truck. But if you look at that truck, I would not allow somebody to open that door and drag me out and then pummel me with objects and crush my skull. Not going to happen. And you should not allow that as well. So, if there's a vehicle in front of you, okay, when you are pulling up to that vehicle, you want to leave space behind the front end of your car and the rear end of the vehicle in front of you. This will provide you room to maneuver, and in case the vehicle behind you is trying to knock you forward, remember, in a stressful situation like a riot, people will do unpredictable things. So you don't want the person behind you knocking you closer and closer to the car in front of you because it takes away your ability to maneuver. So in this top photographs, you can see that you're too close to the car in front of you and there's no room to maneuver. In the bottom one, there's more distance and it does allow you to maneuver. This is also a skill that you in your normal day-to-day driving should incorporate. You know, when you're at a stop sign, a stop light, you don't need to be right on the butt of the car in front of you. Give yourself some room, okay? Because at any time, something can break out. That car can stall. That car might have somebody in front of them pointing a gun at them, and they don't want to run them over. You always want the ability to be able to maneuver. You have to be responsible, again, for your safety and security. So now, if a mob of people is blocking your vehicle, you cannot justifiably run them over if you are not in fear of death or serious bodily injury. And this is one of those areas where I see so many people saying, I'm just going to run them over. Well, if you do that, you're probably going to go to prison. And that's just a reality. So now, if your life is in danger, such as somebody's pointing a weapon or throwing a Molotov cocktail at your vehicle, then you may have legal justification to run them over. If rioters are attacking your vehicle, such as they're surrounding it, so they're not allowing you an escape route, they're attempting to flip over your car, they're attempting to break into your vehicle, they're attempting to burn your vehicle, they're pointing a firearm at your vehicle, they have a baseball bat and they're smashing windows or they're smashing your vehicle, then it's reasonable to assume that you're going to suffer serious bodily injury or death. Now you have more legal options available to you. So, in that situation, do not, under any circumstances, exit that vehicle because you'll be quickly overwhelmed by the mob. Okay? Apply steady pressure to the gas pedal and keep your vehicle moving in a forward manner. Think about this for a second. If your vehicle is only going 10, 15, 20, or 25 miles an hour, people are not going to be strong enough to stop that vehicle. The vehicle, you have a 2,000-pound vehicle that's going to have enough power to go through that crowd. Now, if people don't get out of your way, that's on them. They're going to take the chance. You don't want to floor the gas because then you might run over people who incidentally then disable your vehicle and now you're stuck. So what you want to do is apply steady pressure to the gas, keep the vehicle moving, make the people move out of your way, and keep that vehicle moving. Now, if you're in that situation, I would recommend remove your seatbelt because there might be a situation where you do need to make a quick exit from the vehicle, or you may be carrying a firearm and you need the ability to draw your weapon. I highly recommend anybody who carries a firearm, and I do recommend people carry firearms legally, that you carry the firearm on your person. Don't store it in a vehicle. Don't store it in an external carry case that you can become separated from. Have a weapon on you that wherever you go, your weapon is with you. So in such a situation, again, you're in a mob situation. If you need to drive on a sidewalk, by all means do that. Okay, don't worry about, damaging your vehicle. The sidewalk may provide you the ability to get away from the crowd. Now do keep in mind, people use the sidewalk, so there might be innocent people on that sidewalk. So I'm not saying blast through them. You don't want to do that, because there could still be a lot of innocent people there that are in the same situation as you, and you don't want to be liable for hurting innocent people. But if you have nowhere else to go and the sidewalk is available, move forward at a steady pace and keep moving. Now, if you have to exit your vehicle due to a blockade, or a mob, be prepared to fight the crowd if necessary. Now, when I say fight the crowd, I'm not talking a physical fight. I'm talking you have to maneuver yourself and negotiate just the amount of people that might be there. At that point, don't worry about your vehicle. Hopefully you have it insured. Vehicles can be replaced. Property can be replaced. You cannot be replaced, and your family cannot be replaced. So that's your number one priority. So again, if you have to exit your vehicle, blend in, look for an escape route. If you can't find an escape route, look for a place that you can hunker down. And the other thing I would highly recommend is have a go bag for your vehicle. Now, in your go bag, and you see this photo here with me, that's one of my go bags. It's a 511 tactical push pack, and I'm not pushing that particular pack. You can carry whatever you want. Keep some water in it, some food, a medical trauma kit. If you want to carry an extra firearm or at least some extra ammunition, that's a good place to carry it. Always have a flashlight with you and any other items that you might consider essential to help you survive any kind of an encounter. Now, your medical trauma kit should contain a tourniquet. The tourniquet that I highly recommend is a combat application tourniquet, and that's what this is right here. So this is what the number one tourniquet that the military uses, and this is a tourniquet that I really like and use. There are other high quality tourniquets out there as well, but I use the combat application tourniquet. Another tourniquet you might want to consider is what's called the SWAT T tourniquet, and SWAT stands for stretch, wrap, and tuck. And that's a good backup tourniquet, and it's also a good tourniquet or an item because it's multifunctional. The reason I also recommend that is if you have young children with you, the combat application tourniquet will not work on pediatrics. Okay? The SWAT tourniquet will. So now you have a tourniquet for all types of people, large and small. The combat application tourniquet just doesn't work on small or very petite adults. I recommend carrying 2 hemostatic agents. A hemostatic agent is an agent that will stop a severe arterial bleed. And the one I recommend is combat gauze. The reason I recommend carrying 2 is because 1 might not be enough. So if you're having a severe arterial bleed, you want the ability to stop that bleeding as soon as possible. And keep in mind that a person can die from a severe arterial bleed in 5 to 6 minutes. That is not a lot of time. Okay, so you need to get on it. A chest seal. I recommend carrying 2 chest seals, one for an entry wound and an exit wound. So I carry the hyphen vented chest seal. And what a chest seal is for is if you have get shot in the chest or stabbed in the chest, or you have some kind of trauma to the chest and you create an open pneumothorax, the chest seal will seal that to prevent the open pneumothorax. It will help with alleviate breathing problems, and it can keep you alive until you can get to a higher level of medical care. And then I recommend carrying pressure dressings, and I recommend the Israeli bandage. And I do kind of quickly want to touch on a topic that I see in forums and groups, and I read this all over the place, and it's just bad information. Do not use a tampon for a gunshot wound or a severe bleed. That's not what they're designed for, and there's that myth out there that that's what they are. Spend a few dollars. A pressure dressing is cheap to have, okay? It's not an expensive item. You don't need to use something that's not going to be as effective. Now, when you look at the items on the medical trauma kit, they do require some training. So take the time, look up in your area places that will provide training on this. This is generally above basic first aid. So I do recommend that you have basic first aid training, but this is that next level. How do I use a tourniquet? And remember, if you can bleed out in 5 to 6 minutes, don't sit there and say, well, I'll improvise a tourniquet. I'll take off my belt. In the worst case scenario, you don't want to be improvising. You want to use quality equipment. Hemostatic agents, they require a little bit of training. Chest seals, and it's not hard training at all. They're easy to use, but you need to know how to use them correctly and accurately. So I recommend always having a medical trauma kit. The one thing I'd also say is hemostatic agents do have a shelf life. They are a little bit pricey. I think a combat gauze can run about $35 for those, and they last. They have a shelf life of about 5 years, but you want to make sure on what your expiration date is. So now let's talk about home tactics for riots. So here's another bit of truth and reality. It's important to realize that with enough time and persistence, any home can be broken into. So we like to think of our home as our castle and our fortress, but if people want to get in, they're going to get in. But that does not mean, and I am not saying that you should not take proactive steps to secure your home. You absolutely should. You want to be a hard target. In fact, you want to be such a hard target that the people trying to break into your home decide, you know what, the hell with this. I'm going to your neighbor who has no protection in their house, and I could just go in and kick the front door, and I'm in 3 seconds, and your house is just too much work for me. So always be that hard target. So with home, always, if you can, use a security door. Now, there are different types of security doors. Some offer more security than others. I just recommend getting the best one that you can afford and making sure that it's installed correctly. So they should have deadbolts, reinforced locking mechanisms, and your door frame should be secured as well. Now, when your door shuts, the locking mechanism that goes into the door, the screws that keep those plates in place are typically very short screws. You want to pull those out and replace them with longer wood screws that will make it harder for somebody to kick your front door in. The other thing I recommend is if you have any type of windows, that you have a security film over your window. Now in this picture here we see an Arcadia door that has a security film attached to it. Okay, so somebody's obviously tried to get in, very difficult. Again, with enough time and effort and persistence, that window eventually is going to break in. But you can see that it's buying you time to do what you need to do. Whether that's go out to the front door, maybe your house has a safe room, maybe you have weapons that are locked up, and it'll give you time to go get those weapons. So at minimum, that security film is buying you some valuable time that you can use to your advantage. Lighting. You want to have full coverage lighting, so at night there are no dark areas in your house. You should make sure that the lighting is put in a way that they are secure and it won't be so easy to break. Okay? And whoever installs them should be able to do that for you with no problem. You want to have security cameras that include night vision capabilities. Now fortunately, almost all the security cameras built these days come with night vision. I recommend if you get night vision ones that you have ones that do 1080p. That's the highest quality you can get right now. 480 is going to be the lowest. So if you have a 480 camera, you'll be able to see, but it's going to be very grainy and you won't see a lot of detail. 1080 is going to be like high definition. So try to keep up with technology and get the best camera system that you can. You also want a camera system that, if possible, you can download an app and look at any of your cameras from wherever you are in the world, and you have your phone and you can pull up a camera with your cell phone on the app. Great asset, because you can be in your house potentially, look at all of your cameras, and you can see where the threats are potentially coming from. That's a great thing to have. Know your neighborhood, know your neighbors. Now I say that, and in some respects that might be wishful thinking, because a lot of people I talk to, Depending on where they live in very transient areas where people move into the neighborhood, they move out, and there's really no consistency to the neighborhood, and they don't really know their neighbors. If that's where you live, I would just say, try to get to know your neighbors. Know the layout of your neighborhood so that you know where every entry and exit point is. And if you've lived there for any amount of time, that's something you can learn very easily. Always have multiple ways that you can get into and out of your neighborhood in case things go wrong. And then know what neighbors you can count on if things go south, and know what neighbors that you can't count on, because they're equally important. And when possible, I would say, try to train together. Just talk, and you don't have to come across as paranoid or conspiracy theory. Just, get to know them a little bit and start talking about, hey, if a riot came to our neighborhood, ask them, what are you going to do? What would you do? And then breach the topic and start discussions. Be neighborly. Be friendly to your neighbors. And then I would always say, have a contingency plan, okay? And have a contingency plan for your contingency plan. It's always a good idea to have backup plans and know what you're going to do when things go wrong. And Mr. Murphy's alive and well, so if something can go wrong, Mr. Murphy will see to it that it does. But the more you've trained for it, the more you've prepared for it, the better off you will be when those things do go wrong. So, when we talk about riots, whether you end up in a riot or the riot comes to your location, it's a very dangerous and volatile situation. It's important for you to remain calm, develop a plan, keep your situational awareness going, take in information. So, let's wrap things up on what we discussed today. By definition, riots are dangerous and violent. Okay? That's just what they are. And while protests generally are peaceful, they can become violent at any time and go from a peaceful protest to a riot situation very easily. Avoidance is the best option, but you don't always get to make that choice. Situational awareness is an absolutely critical skill, and again, I'm going to reiterate, if you don't have situational awareness, start learning it now. Start practicing it. Buy my book, Surviving Violent Encounters, Win, Survive, Prevail. I talk about situational awareness. I talk about concepts such as the OODA loop. I give you what you need to remain safe. Okay, so you can go to Amazon and get that. In a riot, your goal is to escape the location. If you can't escape, your goal is to blend in. Avoid the police and avoid the rioters. Just be that gray person. If you can't escape, look for a place maybe that you can hunker down and remain safe. Okay? If you're in your vehicle, avoid getting out of the vehicle if at all possible. Okay? If you have to get out of your vehicle, don't worry about the vehicle at that point. Get away from it and, again, look for that escape route. Have a go bag in your vehicle. In your go bag, you should always have water, some food. If you take any medicines for any kind of medical condition, you want some medicine in there. A flashlight. Anything that you think will help you survive, you want in that go bag. And remember, a go bag isn't just for a riot situation. It could be you're traveling somewhere and your vehicle breaks down, or you get a flat and your spare tire is flat. Okay, so it can be anything that will help get you through a certain period of time to help keep you safe. So if you have any questions for me, my direct email is officersurvival@cox.net. Please don't hesitate to email me, contact me. I will try to be very responsive to any emails that I get. I also have a Facebook page called Officer Survival for Probation and Parole Officers. While it is about probation and parole, I do discuss a lot of safety issues. So even if you're not a PO and you're not in that field at all, I do bring up a lot of safety and survival tactics on there that are good for everybody. So come like that page as well. I'm on Twitter at Commit to Win. And again, if you have any questions for me, please don't hesitate to contact me. I'd love to hear from you. And I wanted to thank everybody from around the world who participated tonight. It was great being here. I hope you got some valuable information out of this. Even if you got one or two pieces of valuable information that you can go forward and make your life safer or your family safer, that's a win in my book, and I'm good with that. So thank you very much, and be safe and be careful.